The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Thanks for hanging out. Welcome to Thursday. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark back in studio. And plenty of college football to sift through as we are marching towards the end of July and camp to start. We'll spend time with Brandon Vogel from HailVarsity.com and magazine, managing editor. Get his thoughts before media days and as we dip our toe into the water before camp gets cranked up. Gary Barnett with us in 1 hour. We'll talk some college ball with Barney. And then former Husker and high school coach at Scott does just a great job in the metro area. Matt Vrzal going to be with us at 5:25. We'll talk some Big Red topics with Matt Vrzal. You catch him, of course, with Hurrdat and his Husker Hangover show Sunday mornings during the season. That is streamed, and it's a ton of fun to listen to Vrz's takes on things. Numbers to get in can dial up today at 489-1240, 489-1240, or you can stream in and check us out on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Check out that. Can also comment on the StreamYard. Watch the show as well with the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio, and give Elijah a follow at Herbal Essence on Twitter. Connor Clark at C_Clark_27. Chris Schmidt, that's me, at Schmidt_radio. A lot of, some say, whining by Lane Kiffin today on NIL as he took to the podium, and more comments not about what he said, but more so how disheveled Lane looked. No tie, that's all right. Had the Rebel blue blazer on and had the collar popped just a bit. Hair was, well, as only Lane can do it. So, guys, how we doing today? Gearing up for a busy weekend?
Yeah, I think my bigger question with Lane, just to return to that for 1 second, did he give an opening statement?
I don't know, man. I wasn't glued to the SEC network today.
The only
are you going to really PTSD us for almost a year ago with the statement gate
that
did not
stupid.
Happen?
Okay, so the guy didn't give an opening statement. So what? Like,
guy didn't give an interview either.
That's true.
To anybody.
That's true. That's a bigger indictment, but
that's more of my gripe. But
yeah, no, things are going well today. I got all 9 on my Immaculate Grid with a little bit of help from Connor Clark, because Immaculate Grid has added NFL.
Huh? Ooh.
And you've heard of the Immaculate Grid, right, Schmitty?
Please talk to me.
They got the 9 spaces. Mm-hmm. On one side you have 3 teams or 2 teams in a stat, and the other side you have 3 teams. So today, across the top, it was the 49ers, the Vikings, and then a 1,000-yard receiving season. And then across the x-axis, it was the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Falcons. So I had to find a player who played for both the 49ers and the Eagles. And then a player who played for both the Vikings.
That's pretty
and the
awesome.
Yeah, so I got all 9. I wasn't my rarity score was low. I gave some pretty common answers, but
you filled the squares.
Filled the squares in there in 9 tries. So big thank you to Connor Clark for giving me a little help on that before the show.
That's pretty good. We'll get into some topics du jour today, and this comes out of the Athletic Mailbag with Stuart Mandel. I want to go here. We had a fun talk about touchdowns and quarterback play and rushing and receiving yesterday, but this is a question that came up, and I want to chop it up with you, and that is, if it were today, not 2009, do you think the Big Ten would have considered and added Nebraska? Now, that's a fun hypothetical to try and tackle, today versus yesteryear. And you look at what Nebraska was coming off of, or what they were at least, from 2000 to 2009. You had some back-to-earth seasons. You had some tough seasons, some sub-500 seasons. But you also had a competitive 9 or 10 win football program as well for most of that decade. You were winning 9 ball games. You lost one too many. You went 5-6 in 04, and you went 5-7 in 07. But everything else was 9 wins or better. And above all, you go back to the reasoning of adding Nebraska back in 2009. And while it's not the juggernaut it used to be, it's still a brand ad. That was Jim Delaney's reasoning. And while the brand is still strong, and I think Stuart Mandel put it best, Nebraska is still a top 5 brand in college football. Does that brand, despite the recency of 6 losing seasons, I mean, there's just no way to tell. Do you think Nebraska goes through what they go through, coaching changes and bowlless seasons, if they're still in the Big 12? And I don't know. I think part of the issue has been coaching change. Coaching change after coaching change, and different schemes and different recruiting philosophies and different styles, and nothing really ever meshing up. And oh yeah, by the way, you're in the Big Ten, where everybody with a headset on and their assistant coaches are damn good. Not that they're not good in the Big 12, but the Big 12 didn't have a Leipold at Kansas. Okay, A&M always was an underachiever, but still not an easy win or not a guaranteed win. And some years they were a loss. Okie State's been really good. Oklahoma's been Oklahoma. Texas has kind of fallen on their face because of the coaching changes. Iowa State's risen with Campbell. They're a good program, although they're trying to bounce back. And quite honestly, I mean, you have Baylor and TCU. They've risen to new heights. They've been 10, 11 win football teams. Tech, really good now, not so much after Leach. Okay? So who's to say? The Big Ten's a much tougher, more physical league, and the style of play is different in the Big Ten than it is the Big 12. So I don't know. I think because of the brand, and they went through some of the numbers. Nebraska was a tough football team to take last year with their record. And you add Nebraska because of all of these matchups that have happened, and they've not been instant classics. Let's just put it nicely. When Nebraska plays Ohio State, Nebraska has gotten drubbed a lot of the time. When they played Michigan, Nebraska has gotten beaten handily a lot of the time, especially on the road. Nebraska-Iowa has been pretty good drama. Nebraska-Wisconsin, that's one-sided, absolutely one-sided. Nebraska-Penn State, those have been thrillers. Those have been really pretty good games, except for the 2017 game. So all those matchups make people's eyes light up when it comes to a Saturday afternoon or a Saturday night in college football. Whether you're a casual college football fan or maybe you're just a fan of Oklahoma or Texas or Notre Dame, you're going to check out Nebraska, Ohio State, or some of these other teams I mentioned. So I still think, despite 6 years running of no bowl games, people are still watching those games. You're talking 3 to 4 million people.
Yeah, and think about who the Big Ten has added since Nebraska. Rutgers, Maryland. And I'm not sitting here saying that Nebraska is head and shoulders above these teams in football, because they're not, but that's not what matters. What matters is the amount of eyes that you bring to the Big Ten, and Nebraska still does great in that. Records come and go, good teams come and go, brands don't die. And Nebraska has a brand.
It's a long, long time for your shelf life to expire.
I mean, how many other Big Ten teams have a media market like we do here in Nebraska, where it gives us, you, me, Connor, it gives us the chance to do this show? It's rare in the Big Ten to have as many radio shows we have talking about the Huskers as we do in the state of Nebraska, because Nebraska is still a great brand. Something you can talk about is Nebraska's AAU status. That went away once they joined the Big Ten, but would they have let that go away if they hadn't joined the Big Ten? I don't know.
They were already in.
Yeah, they were already in, and now it doesn't matter. So why does the AAU affiliation matter if we're already into the conference that we plan on being in long term? It didn't matter. If UCLA went 2-10 last year, Do you think that would have kept them from getting an invite to the Big Ten?
You're still adding UCLA.
The brand is bigger than any one team or any string of bad results through a couple of seasons, and Nebraska's brand will be bigger than the decade of irrelevance that they've just had. Would it be a harder sell to the Big Ten? Maybe, but I still think there's way too much upside with the amount of eyes that care to watch Nebraska every single week, and that the Big Ten, I don't think, could say no.
Guys, I don't think Nebraska has, if they're in the Big 12, stylistically, up until this year, I don't think they're missing bowl games. Maybe they miss a year or two, but I don't think they miss consecutively.
And you probably have a couple of conference championships to your name. And the question is does the conference title, it went away for 4 or 5 years for the Big 12 back when Nebraska and Colorado left? It probably doesn't go away, so there's a little bit of a tougher road. But like 2012, Kansas State won the Big 12 with a 10-2 record. In 2013, Baylor won the Big 12 with a 10-2 record. And then in 2014, it was Baylor winning it with a 10-2 record. Like, there were opportunities to be had to go win the Big Ten immediately after Nebraska left.
It wasn't Texas and it wasn't Oklahoma winning the Big 12.
Yeah, and then you get to 2015, 2016, whenever Oklahoma starts rising back to the top and it becomes tough again. But there was a couple years where Nebraska, even in the Big Ten, had some good teams and probably would have been a team that was to be reckoned with in the Big 12. I'm not going to tell you they're going to win all those conference title games, but damn, they were going to be in the hunt. And I think they probably could have beaten that 2012 Kansas State team or that 2013
Nebraska's
Baylor
2012 team, yeah. Nebraska's 2010 team almost won it on the way out the door. The 2011 team was really pretty talented and just kind of faded at the end. And you have the 2012 team that got mauled by, Wisconsin was the third place team and the Legends or Leaders or whatever it was named because your two teams better than them were ineligible for the Big Ten championship game. Matt was asking what other state would the Big Ten have taken. It wasn't a state. I mean, I think it was a settle. You couldn't. You kept trying to knock on Notre Dame's door. Okay, can't get Notre Dame. What's another Midwest brand? Because you've already got Ohio State, you've already got Michigan. So Nebraska makes sense. And with the way things were teetering in the Big 12 and in the Texas influence, get the hell out of there and go get paid.
And to talk about butterfly effect here, we could argue that the era of conference realignment that we're in right now wouldn't look the same if Nebraska hadn't jumped ship whenever they did. Nebraska kicked off the era of conference realignment.
Nebraska was the wow name.
Yes. And I'm not saying that there wouldn't have been conference realignment, but maybe we wouldn't be moving towards these two super conferences if Nebraska hadn't jumped ship and moved to the Big Ten.
Well, you look at A&M and you look at Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean, those two schools are the ones that kicked off. You know what? The Big Ten and the SEC are the next two conferences that are going to run this country. It was Nebraska and Texas A&M that kicked that off. And if Nebraska didn't leave the Big 12, would Texas A&M leave the Big 12? We don't know. You could argue maybe they'll stick around. Maybe the Big 12 retains some relevancy for a couple years.
Just blame Texas.
And Texas A&M doesn't feel the need to leave. Like,
when in doubt.
Just blame Bevo.
Yeah.
It's a crazy discussion to make, though, because if Nebraska doesn't leave the Big 12, we don't know what college football looks like nowadays because of the butterfly effect that it led to with the era of conference realignment. It was Nebraska that led to some of that. I'm not going to say all of that. You could also argue that the rising influence of TV markets on the conferences.
You had to go get stability and you had to go get paid.
But it was Nebraska who kicked it off, and I wonder how different the world of college football looks if Nebraska never leaves the Big Ten in the first place.
Well, I want to go to, like Jeff said earlier, no way that the Big Ten would take Nebraska right now.
We just don't know that their record would have been as bad. I don't think the last 6 years necessarily happened in the Big 12.
But even regardless, I think if they still had the records that they have had, and Elijah alluded to it, you alluded to it, it's at the end of the day, it's brand, right? How are you going to get eyeballs? How are you going to get money in the door, right? And Nebraska does that very, very well. That's a big reason why they're playing on a Thursday night this year. It's a big reason why they're playing on a Friday night at Illinois this year. I know it's not, the most appealing kickoff times, that's for sure. But, hey, they put them there because they know, regardless, they're going to get the eyeballs there. So I know you want the results to be there, but as Elijah said, too, they've also had Maryland and Rutgers, and football-wise, they haven't been very good. Basketball is a different story, but I think Nebraska still probably gets an invite right now because of the brand, because of the money that they can bring in and the eyeballs that they can bring to Fox, to the Big Ten Network, which is one of the better TV networks for a conference in the country. I mean, and now you have the new TV deal as well. I mean, think about what NBC and CBS and Fox all want. They want more Nebraska on there too because they're going to get more eyeballs, right? So at the end of the day, it comes down to the big red N and not really the results on the field as much when it comes to adding a team and a brand like Nebraska is.
And I know Nebraska, why they were added was their Big Ten, or was their football brand, what it would bring to the Big Ten. So it's not a like-for-like argument, but look at Maryland in 2013 before they joined the Big Ten. They were coming off of 6-6 and 4-8, and the year before that they were 2-10. This was not a football brand. I know the Maryland ad wasn't necessarily because of football, but like the record on the field is not the most important thing.
No, it's the TV market. You're getting the DC market, and the TV market was not the argument, but it was the fan base that's national that was the argument. It's the brand, it's the eyeballs, it's the classic matchups, it's the helmet games, and yeah, you have a national following.
It's hard for
Nebraska.
It's hard for the Big Ten to ignore it too because their headquarters are in Chicago. I can't tell you how many Nebraska people there are in the heart of Big Ten country in Chicago too, right? I mean, you can't ignore it. So they're everywhere. You mentioned a national fan base. You've seen them flood stadiums like the Rose Bowl, like Notre Dame, like everywhere. So,
Boulder.
It's a part of it.
Well, we'll check in with Brandon Vogel. Interesting discussion point here on the mailbag. Some thoughts on the upcoming season with Vogues. Gary Barnett next hour. Matt Vrzal joins us. It's Hail Varsity presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
So, full disclosure, I may have to invest in some new headphones. We had what do we call her? The Princess Fiona Pitbull in this morning on the morning show, a little 5-year-old sweetie, and she thinks she's a lapdog. Well, she got tangled up in the surrender white headphones I wear, and so the left earpiece that connects to the plug-in is on its last legs.
Yeah, I was wondering what was going on there, and I should note, my left headphone hasn't worked in like a year, so if you find any good deals, send them my way as well, because I could use a new pair.
Every 5 years, there's a coaching change, and I have to buy a new pair of Beat headphones. I mean, I don't know. Vogues, do you have problems? Brandon Vogel, managing editor, Hail Varsity, with us at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter, and author with John Cook, Dream Like a Champion. Are you picky with your headphones? Are you as picky as the Big Ten might have been now if they're choosing teams for expansion?
No, not really. The AirPods work pretty well for me, although it's always, if I'm on multiple Mac devices, which I pretty much am all the time, like when I get a phone call, it's like, do I go here? Do I go there? And it always takes like 7 or 8 seconds. Like tragedy, I know. 7 or 8 seconds in today's world, in this economy. No, but I mean, Elijah, I'm sorry to hear about your headphones. It explains so much, though. I always felt like you were only getting like half of what I was saying. So now I know.
Man.
Damn.
Wow. Vogues, good opening salvo there. What did they get your thoughts on this hypothetical that comes out of the mailbag from The Athletic? But if it came down to picking dodgeball teammates, i.e. conference realignment, does Nebraska get passed up on by the Big Ten if everything stays the same? And that's hard to imagine. It's not hard to imagine Nebraska having issues and turmoil because of coaching change. That's been rampant and an issue for Nebraska. It's been an issue for Tennessee. It's been an issue for SC. It's been an issue for Texas. We can go down the list of teams at Miami that haven't thrived like they once thrived. That said, I just think the brand and the eyeballs that you bring to these helmet games is too much to pass up, even if you're kind of wandering in the desert a bit like Nebraska's been the last 6 seasons.
Yeah. Does Nebraska get passed up? No. I don't think so at all. So we're operating theoretically like they've been in the Big 12 this entire time, had the exact same record. It's still, look at Ryan Field when Nebraska plays a road game there. That's why Nebraska's here. I mean, and the interesting about it in 2011, because to that point, conference realignment had always been about like, well, let's scoop this place up because it's got a massive TV market. It even was in 2014. I mean, that's the Rutgers play was that. Nebraska never offered that, not to the degree that other places and bigger markets would have. It was about like the tradition, the intense passion with which people follow all Husker teams. So I don't think the win-loss record diminishes that any, because it hasn't diminished really fans' passion to the degree that you would think. Now, we can look at some of those games late in seasons over the past couple of years, and we've seen scanned ticket data, and we know it's not what it was in 1997 or even 2000, 2008, 2009, but it's still by and large the same. And when the Huskers go on the road, that part feels very much the same to, I think, what we're used to as people who follow this program.
And Brandon, one of the things I said back in the first segment, which I think kind of fits your argument, is that good teams will come and go through a program, but the brand of a football program is what's not going to go away, or at least it's a lot harder to kill. Will take a lot longer, and that's why Nebraska's in the Big Ten here. It's not because of what they are on the field, it's because of the brand that they bring to the conference. And you primarily look at football, but look across all sports too. Volleyball, you look at baseball, you look at women's soccer, like all these sports that Nebraska has at one point in time during the Big Ten led the way, and if not pretty consistently when you look at the volleyball program, it's bigger than just the results on the football field.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, an argument that you could make without much difficulty that, Nebraska has elevated the level of volleyball across the conference just by being here, which, is a whole other interesting topic. But I think you're right. Like, you look at the history of college football, like, teams go through their fallow periods, and Nebraska's is at a point now where it's a little longer than what you're used to seeing. Alabama won a title in '92, and then really kind of walked through the wilderness until Saban returned. Yeah, didn't. I mean, Texas wins a national title in 2005. Hasn't had one, wins a national title and a conference title, but hasn't had one since 2009, I believe, was their last one. But still, it's not like Nebraska. You got to go back to '99. It's getting pretty long, so something needs to happen here. But here we are in the off season, and you got yet another new coaching hire. Everyone's been, well, maybe not. It's another one where people seem to be really, really excited and behind it, and we'll see if things. The advantage of having a brand like that in college football is maybe it took 20 years. Maybe it took way longer than anybody thought. But if Nebraska starts getting closer to what it has traditionally been, it's that Nebraska is back. And, we don't want to mess with Texas is back and that whole thing. But that's the advantage kind of boiled down. It's like, you're supposed to be here. Welcome home.
Brandon Vogel's with us on Hail Varsity Radio. And when you talk about Nebraska being added as a brand, and then we've also touched on Maryland and Rutgers being added for the market. In your eyes, which one is more important for a conference financially? Is it the market or is it the brand?
I think it's the brand, and even 2014 kind of feels like that was one of the last gasp efforts where that could be. I mean, and part of that's too is because the teams get snapped up, but there just weren't a lot of those the Rutgers type plays to be made after that. But also, like, entertainment and television has entirely changed. Like, the ratings are entirely different. The entire model for that is different. So I don't think that's much of a factor anymore. Sure, it's a nice kicker for the SEC that Texas is Texas, and it's a huge state, and that is the state university there, and Austin's a good-sized city. Oklahoma, pretty similar to Nebraska. It's not like the Norman TV market is making a big dent there for the SEC based on what it has.
Vogues, you talked about getting or coming home, so to speak, getting back to your place in the college football landscape a moment ago. What do you think is different about Coach Rule? There's optimism, there's excitement, there's a feeling that you get it right and it can be what it was. Not dynasty per se, that's not fair to throw at anybody, but consistency for sure. What, as you've kind of covered Rule here this short period, sticks out to you? What's different?
Well, maybe somewhat ironic, given what I said about the value of a brand. But I think the value that I've seen so far with Coach Rule is that his approach doesn't feel like he's doing it to get Nebraska back, if that makes sense, if that distinction is clear enough. Like the downside of taking a job at a place like at Nebraska, and you have many more advantages, but it's heavy. There's a weight to it. I think we saw it with Frost. A little bit with Riley of, calling it kind of one big adventure, which, an adventure is like, who knows what's going to happen. And then, with Pelini and I didn't sense it so much with Coach Pelini right at the start. He was first time head coach too, but as things went on, like, I think you started to see the weight of what we'll call it the Nebraska thing. And it's a tough thing to navigate because the Nebraska thing, the tradition, the brand is what makes this still a very good place. But you can't let it kind of define, I think, your approach. You got to be about whatever your plan is to win football games. You got to be about that plan for the sake of the plan, not because it's, we're at Nebraska now, so the expectation is we gotta win.
And Brandon, one of the things with Pelini was that as his teams got better, the expectations got higher, and it became hard to manage, I think, for him, the fact that 10-2 needed to become 12-0. It needed to become a BCS-type season. And I want to get your thoughts on if the past 10 years has changed Husker fans in that right in any way. Do you think that if Matt Rule can take 3-9 and make it 10-2, do you think that 10-2 won't become enough anymore?
If they stay there, it's just kind of human nature broadly to look towards what's next, to be like, I'm very happy with what we have, but what if we could get a little bit more? So go, do exactly what Bo Pelini does for, 7 years, go 9-4 or 10-4. And, it doesn't mean that there's a lot of context that goes around that, but the question would be there again, very much so. And it wouldn't even take all 7 years to be like, this has been nice, but can we do more? It's just, it's how people are wired.
Vogues, let's spend a minute here on college football as a whole. And we just touched on Rule and kind of his process. Question out there, what Power 5 head coach is most likely to succeed at their new school? 16% of the polled audience says it's going to be Rule. Luke Fickell's in at a whopping 49%, Hugh Freeze at 13%, Brom and Dion at 6.5%. Why do you think Fickell will succeed? Is it as simple as dude's good and Cincinnati was not an easy job but a winnable job and he's been in the Big Ten? What's your take? Why would you bet on Fickell to be able to get Wisconsin over that hump? You got about 90 seconds.
Yeah, I think he'll be good. I don't know if I was taking that poll, if he would be, and I had one pick, if he would be my one pick.
Okay.
And it would be close, but reasons he wouldn't be. He's familiar with the Big Ten. Cincinnati played a very Big Ten brand of football. That said, it was his minus the interim season at Ohio State. Like, he did it at one place. And anytime you move, things are, it's hard to anticipate all the things that are different. Rule for me would have an edge in that because he's done it twice at two places. Like, there's not a lot more different in terms of surroundings from Temple to Baylor. So I think that gives him a little bit of credit there for me. Hugh Freeze is not in the conversation. Like, you beat Alabama twice. Good job. But beyond that, I'm kind of like, sure. So who was the fourth one? Who am I forgetting about?
Prime.
Oh, yeah. That one's got a lot of interesting questions. A lot of intrigue, but a lot of questions.
Vogues, you take care. We'll check in Saturday. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right, more with Hail Varsity on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
25 minutes, Gary Barnett will join us. We'll talk World of College Football with him, maybe get some thoughts from the Open as well. And then Matt Vrzal going to join us, talk some Husker football. Good stuff from Brandon Vogel. Get the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, the audio portion, full show, or the segments you want to hear with Hail Varsity Radio. The video portion going to be up on a couple of different spots for you. The Hail Varsity YouTube. Could also rewatch or catch up with the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed. Give that a follow at HVarsity Radio. Reminder about your friends from Dyer Law. If you've been hurt in a personal injury accident, you can always count on Dyer Law, the team to provide you with a helping hand when you need it. No matter what you're dealing with, call Dyer Law today at 402-393-7529 or visit Dyer.law to chat with a trusted professional about your injury claim. Dyer.law. That's Dyer.law, 402-393-7529. Give them a shout today. We don't do a lot of birthday shout-outs, but we're going to give a big old birthday shout-out to our friend from the Black Hills, Brendan Bora. Happy birthday. We're honored. You're celebrating 35. God, I wish I was 35 again. According to some rejoins, I am. But 35, and Brendan says, go Big Red. Happy birthday to you, Brennan. Best to you, man. Should be a good birthday, and I'm sure the weather's fantastic up there in the Black Hills.
The question is, does it sound like Brennan was born with the beer in one hand and a stogie
in the other? Hey, it's a good way to be born. We'll just say that. So, Lane Kiffin, you're either all in on Lane or you're out on Lane, and well, Lane's whining about just how college football is in an awful spot. It's gone to hell in a handbasket. And Elijah, Ole Miss is one of the haves. Like, you could argue, allegedly, they were doing NIL payments before NIL. Okay?
That's one way to put it.
Right? I mean, there's a lot of smoke around Ole Miss, and man, they got good real quick under Hugh Freeze. They had a lot of NFL talent. They got a lot of NFL talent to go to Oxford. Voges was right on. Hugh Freeze was 2-1 against Alabama. And they would stumble elsewhere in the season and end up a 10-4, 9-3 type deal. But they were good. They were really good. And they should have been with the talent they were able to bring in so quickly. They have been able to navigate. They land Lane Kiffin, and he's been there. And the way they started, they absolutely limped to the finish. Do we have Lane ready? Mm-hmm. Okay, Lane Kiffin going off here. A little longer cut, but this is about a 3-minute excerpt from him blasting NIL and the state of college football.
So I'm going to address the portal NIL, what I kind of call disaster that we're in. And so I know that question is going to come. And the reason why I break that down usually is because I do afterwards get a lot of feedback from you guys in the media or fans that they're appreciative, of a coach that really addresses where it's at and what are the challenges with it. So first off, I've always said I think it's phenomenal that players get a chance to get paid, which is great. I do think, which I've stood up here and said before when it first happened, that there's going to be some major issues, and we're creating free agency with the portal. And with NIL, you've got a lot of pay for play going on, and that is what it is. So, those two things combining, there just is not a system in place. And I don't think that there's any other sports at any level that are like this, that really you every year can opt into free agency, really twice a year. And I was just thinking on a plane ride over here, what if you had that in other sports? Tom Brady, Asia Wilson, Lionel Messi, LeBron James. What if every year those guys can opt into free agency twice a year, really, and they got no long-term contracts? Basically, everybody's not even on a 1-month contract because they can leave in 2 windows. So that was Lane Kiffin. We cut it a bit short. I know there was a little
technical difficulty. So the long and short is NIL problematic, portal problematic, free agency is an issue, and it's driving him and a lot of college football coaches nuts. So he's going to complain about it. He took very few questions today about his Ole Miss squad. Now, the reality is Lane Kiffin leveraged his early success for an $11 million payday for Ole Miss. Otherwise, he was going to Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
So Lane Kiffin also left Tennessee after a year and went to USC. So Lane's been about Lane, and I don't think he's begrudging the opportunity, but from a management standpoint, he isn't wrong. So you need to figure out how to manage.
When it's this tough.
You got recruiting, right? You got your signing day, you got your free transfer, and then you have your grad transfer. So you could bolt 3 different times and go get paid 3 different times for NIL. So it comes down to me, Elijah. Man, you better have a kid here for the right reasons. And you've got to do all sorts of homework and due diligence. Now, what Lane's right about is summer workouts. They suck. They're awful. And then you're ticked off about them. Guess what? Grass is greener over here. Someone's calling to tamper and try and flip your kid to that portal.
Well, and this is the problem with both NIL and the transfer portals. Whenever it doesn't benefit your team, it's coaches going and screaming to the high heavens, this is bad for college football. It's ruining the game we love.
He landed 2 quarterbacks, for God's sake.
That's what I'm saying. Whenever it benefits your team, well, it's so important we give the kid the chance to make the right choice for their future and be able to profit off of themselves while they're at their highest.
Eye of the beholder, baby.
And it's always going to be this way in college football is, yeah, you cannot like it, but the simple fact of the matter is this is the future of college football. This is what we're in right now. Could there be some changes? Yeah, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, you're going to use that transfer portal just the same that you're going to go take that big-time contract from another school, because it's about allowing kids and allowing coaches to make the right choices for themselves. And if you don't like it, well, sorry, that's the future of college football. You're the one who's still using it.
You're using it, and you're using it to your advantage, and the ones that will survive in this era, Saban absolutely hates this, but he's adapted. He's adapted. You get a collective. You get your boosters in line, and to be honest, you put a staff together, not just your coaches, but a support staff, and you manage that roster like it's an NFL team, and you keep your ears open. Who's interested? Who's looking? You don't tamper. Don't be that team or coach, but have a contingency if and when it hits the fan, because you lose some kids. Everyone's got in a way, it's a level playing field because you can add portal kids. Now, what's not fair is the different bank accounts and the different setups, but it's better to be one of the haves. So, Mark, I know, Lane was giving the listeners the silent treatment. We got to paraphrase. We'll wind down hour 1 on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this first hour. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark back in next hour. Gary Barnett 10 minutes away. And then Matt Vrzal, former Husker, and just a standout in the Metro community when it comes to coaching and also training. So we'll talk with Verz, get his thoughts on the Big Red. Chad emails in, chris@hailvarsity.com. We kicked off the show talking about the question in the mailbag from The Athletic. Would Nebraska be as desirable right now by the Big Ten? Would the Big Ten still add Nebraska in 2023? And from a brand play, that's why Delaney did it. It wasn't a TV deal. And I don't know the butterfly effect topic of, would Nebraska have struggled the last 6 years like they have in the Big 12 compared to the Big 10? And we don't know. I don't think they would have. I don't know that they'd have a great record against Oklahoma or Kansas State or maybe even Iowa State. I don't know that. And before Leipold got there, or if Leipold's there sooner, I don't know that they're beating Kansas. Who knows?
Well,
it's been a bad era.
Well, it's so interesting to dive into, because if Nebraska doesn't leave the Big 12, do they have to leave the fertile Texas recruiting grounds? And if they don't, then does Bo Pelini ever get kicked to the curb? Does Mike Riley ever take charge? Does Scott Frost ever come to Nebraska? Like, there's so many what-ifs in this situation.
I know.
It's almost a little bit of a pointless conversation, but I see
kind of an
point.
entertaining conversation, because if all things being equal, if you're 6 straight losing seasons of no bowl work, does the Big Ten still come a-knocking? The recency part of things helped a lot. You just played in a conference title game. Within the last 2 decades, you'd won 3 national championships. So, I mean, you were still one of the toughest guys in the bar, versus right now trying not to bump into anybody at the bar. That should change under rule. But Chad's email, Chad in Hastings, Texas is the only team to destroy 2 conferences. So there's that. There's no love, baby. There's no love.
Texas is the only team to destroy 2 conferences so far.
So far.
Well,
they're not going to do anything with the SEC. Chamber Gaming checks in. I thought Ole Miss just succeeded with EMCC, Last Chance U transfers.
Did you ever get around to watching Last Chance U?
I have it on the list to do. I started rewatching House of Cards.
Okay, my roommate's done the same, actually.
Yeah, and is screwed up as Kevin Spacey is with all of the charges, the alleged charges with him. Man, that show was good.
Yeah.
Incredible show.
No, but Last Chance, it's a little dated now. It was kind of fun to be able to watch the players and see who ended up going off and making college careers out of it, who ended up making it to the NFL. So it might even be fun to watch in hindsight, seeing if you recognize any names. But you really got to dive in on that. It's important for somebody in sports media to watch Last Chance U and see how the JUCO scene actually works.
Oh, I mean, I remember talking with Randy Gregory while he was at Nebraska about his time at Western Arizona. And he's like, man, you just get through it, you get out, and then you get to a program, because it was so isolated.
Yep.
Coach Barty on the way. 10 minutes from now, it's Hail Varsity Hour 2 coming up.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you, it's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. We welcome in Hall of Fame coach with Colorado and Northwestern, Gary Barnett joins us. Coach, thanks for the time. How's the week?
Chris, it's a busy week, Chris. We got the Open going on. We got lots of stuff happening. So, and football's getting ready to get started. So it's fine though. It's been hot here. Started to cool off just a little bit in Boulder, but it's been a good summer.
We have an update from listener Moonbot7 on our stream that says there's wind, heavy rain, hail just showing up in Denver. So we're given the forecast a few miles, a lot of miles south of where you're at.
Yeah, I just heard the horn blow to get everybody off the golf course about a half an hour ago here. So we've been getting a little bit of rain every day. It's been nice. Everything's green in Colorado, and so, yeah, I know they're expecting a lot of rain down in Denver.
Coach, a lot going on with college football. I want to get into college football survey that's been out with The Athletic. And one of the questions out there, which first-year Power 5 head coach is most likely to succeed at his new school? Leading the way is Luke Fickell, followed by Rule, there's Hugh Freeze, there's Dion, there's Jeff Brom. And I want to kind of rapid fire to start off and ask you about each as to why you think they'll be able to succeed. Start off with Fickell because he led the way with the polling at 49%.
Well, I think Fickell's really I think he's reputationally so solid, and he's going into a program that's won a lot of games over the last 5 or 6 years consistently. Haven't been able to get to the big one, but I sort of like that choice. I think Fickell's probably got more people coming back at Wisconsin. I think that he's a really good fit from the beginning. So, yeah, I like that choice. I mean, it's all a crapshoot. You don't know who's going to do it. It comes down to injuries and things like that. But, yeah, I like Fickell. I like Matt Rule as a choice as well, especially given their schedule. I think they've got a really a schedule that gives them a real chance.
Rule comes in second. What do you think can be different? And why will it work in your eyes in Lincoln with Rule?
Well, part of it is timing, and part of it is there's probably enough players in place. I think the schedule plays into it. Mm-hmm. I think you're getting a veteran guy who's been in these rebuild situations. And not that Nebraska is so much of a rebuild, but, if you sit back and if you don't know anything about Nebraska and you look at it and their record, you think it's a rebuild. But, I think just the combination of Matt's personality and what he's done in the past and where I think Nebraska is, I mean, those of us who've been around this football world for a while know that you're not rebuilding in Nebraska. You really aren't. And you've got all the things in place that you need to have a really quality program.
Gary Barnett is with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And Gary, whenever you look at both Fickell and Rule, I think that the big difference between the two of them with what they're trying to get going at their respective programs is the starting point with what Fickell inherits. And you kind of alluded to that, but I want to get your thoughts on just how important year one is in terms of the grander scheme of a rebuild. Obviously, you'd rather have more success in year one, but does success in year one necessarily mean that you're going to be ahead of another coach who might have lesser results in their first season?
No, you can't. But the fact that Wisconsin hasn't really. I mean, last year was a down year, but they haven't had down streaks. Nebraska has. And so, I just think that there's more solid base right now for Fickell, and more, there's a little bit more a sense of winning there, where Nebraska's been trying to get back there, but Fickell's walking into a pretty good situation, I think. We'll come down and see what it looks like, throughout the season, but. There's not going to be much difference between the two. But the first year is important because you have to set your foundation. And if you're coming into a program that thinks they're losers or has been losing for a lot, then you've got a harder job than if you're coming into a program that year in and year out's been pretty successful and has just had one down year.
Coach Gary Barnett is with us on Hail Varsity Radio. And Coach, the interesting thing for me about Fickell, too, is he was hired late in the season, well, after the regular season, obviously, last year, but he was able to be on the sideline with Wisconsin during their bowl game, and he's kind of inheriting an already set winning culture. Rule, not so much the winning culture, a very rich one, but not winning. So how far can that propel Fickell in year one coming into a situation that is used to having success?
Well, it comes down to buy-in by players. And if the players aren't, or if they've gotten over being upset that they lost their coach, and they get a chance to be around Fickell in the bowl game. So if they buy in right away, they've got, like you said, the tradition of winning. I mean, it's been there year in and year out. And so it's player buy-in is the most important thing that you can have.
Coach, when I go to SEC Media Days, and it was the Lane Kiffin show today as he was bemoaning NIL, the portal, and he understands that they've used it and they've used it to their advantage. Thoughts on just Lane really making an argument for how bad a place college football is in right now? And second thought on this question, do you see a remedy in Washington with some action getting done, be it from Tuberville or Joe Manchin or some of the folks that have been longtime folks in Senate or Congress there to get kind of at least a blueprint that everyone's got to follow along?
Well, you've got the $64,000 question there, Chris, and it's, going back to your first part of your question about Lane Kiffin and the condition of college football, I think that, coaches deep down know that what's going on probably isn't a good thing for college athletes. But on the other side of the coin, college athletes are all of a sudden feeling their muscle power. They've got people behind them. They've got, congressmen behind the fact that they should be getting all they can get. And it just makes it really difficult for a coach to run a team. And it's crazy out there what's going on. And I see it, and I'm part of it to some extent. But it's just, it's you can't put your hand on it. You just can't put your hand around it. And the only solution probably is through Congress. I don't think anybody really wants that to happen, but I don't see any other way out. There's no way to regulate it and no way to enforce it. And I know you hear this all the time, and everybody says the same sort of thing, but it's true. There's no enforcement possible. There's no way to regulate it unless there's national rules. I don't even know what that's going to look like. My personal opinion is I don't see how they can do it without making the student athletes employees. But if they do that, they're really going to damage all the other sports that are out there, or a lot of the other sports that are out there. So are they willing to do that, I think, is a big question. So, and Title IX's got to figure in there somewhere. And, it seems like we've been having this discussion now for 2 years, but it hasn't gone away, and it's still the same.
Gary, in your mind, is it hypocritical for Lane Kiffin to bemoan some of the changes to college football with NIL and the transfer portal while still utilizing both those options in order to build a football team?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think, coaches for the most part, they got values, and we all grew up in these values. A lot of the older coaches, especially, and I'm not ready to call Lane an older coach yet, but certainly has been around the game for a long time to know what we all think were the values of the game, and I think we look at it and say a lot of it's being eroded. It makes for a really difficult locker room and a difficult, trying to keep a roster, et cetera. And, it's just, you're going to just do whatever you get to do or whatever you think you can do to get your locker room going and to get your team going. And so Lane, in order to survive, has to take advantage of the lack of rules that are out there.
Now, Coach, when you look at it from the player's perspective, and obviously money is one thing, but a good situation playing-wise is another, and I don't like guys playing at 4 schools in 4 different years as much as the next guy, but at the same time, if you're a player and that's the best situation for you to get on the field, it's hard for me to argue with that. So how do you kind of regulate that part of it? I know the money thing is getting out of control, but how do you keep guys in place for at least, say, 2 years?
Well, I'm not sure, Connor. I think, first of all, I agree with you. I think the one-time transfer rule is a good rule. I think it helps everybody in every situation. It helps coaches, helps players, like you said, get on the field. And then when you add in the grad transfer, I think that's a good rule, and thought it was from the get-go. Especially an older guy. An older guy has been somewhere for 4 or 5 years. 4 years. He sort of wants a change of scenery, and I get it. But the ones that are doing 3 and 4 and maybe more of these, I think that's where the big issue is for people. And I think you just make it harder to do more than one. You keep the grad transfer in, do the one-time, no penalty transfer, and then, build in, I don't know how severe it can be, but build in some sort of penalty or at least some really tight guidelines as to whether or not you can do it more than once, excluding the grad transfer.
Gary Barnett with us, few minutes. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, going to switch to recruiting, and I know you loved recruiting Texas, specifically Houston, and Nebraska's been down there 5-6 times. Coach Rule down there earlier this week with the Texas High School Coaches Association. And tell our listeners a little bit about just the level of high school ball and just how advantageous it could be for Nebraska, and it has been for other programs to really find a niche or a foothold in the Houston region.
Well, it's football. High school football's in the fiber of that state, and it's in almost every place within the state. It is really, really important, and there are lots of players. More players play high school football in Texas per capita than any place. The coaching is extremely well organized, and players are extremely well coached, and they're just eager. They've been coached hard for the most cases. So it's you go down and get a kid out of Texas, a player out of Texas. One, he knows how hard it is. Two, he's been coached tough. And he's played against good players, and he's played in an atmosphere where it's really important. Sometimes a lot of players struggle coming to an atmosphere where it's really, really important and fitting in. But guys from Texas don't have a problem with that. So it's probably the best place to go recruit as far as the state goes, is the state of Texas for all those reasons.
Coach, before we get you out, who you circling for the Open? Who do you like? Who you cheering for?
Well, at the end of the guy that's up there that's in the first day that I think's been playing really good, all the way through is Tommy Fleetwood. He's really been in every doggone tournament, and he's at home almost playing there. Mm-hmm. McElroy had a tough day in the bunkers, and Rahm's going to come across. But it'll always be somebody else step up that you don't expect. But Fleetwood, to me, is the sort of the guy that's ready to win this and got the background for it, and wouldn't be surprised if he did.
How are you out of the sand?
Here's what I tell my buddies. I say, look, it's like Brer Rabbit telling Brer Bear, please throw me in the briar patch. I love the sand. I'd rather be in the sand than in the grass. So that is probably my strength in the game. So
okay, well that's
you and no one else.
Yeah, I hate the sand. I absolutely despise it, and the game reflects that. Coach, enjoy your weekend. We'll get caught up again, and thanks for giving us some time today.
You bet. Great being with you guys.
Take care. There he is, Gary Barnett, hustling in as that horn went off, as he was saying, from the golf course. Good perspective there on some college football, global topics, NIL, Nebraska, Rule, recruiting Houston, Nebraska native and standout Husker in his day, Matt Vrzal. Thoughts from Verz coming up next on Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
episode. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We welcome in former Husker and coach at Scott, Matt Vrzal, with us at Verz51, where you find him on Twitter. Verz, what kind of pizza's in the oven, brother?
We got enough, and I'm on about an hour break, so I will head back there here in a little bit, and decided to talk to you on my break time.
Well, God love you. Thanks for doing so. Let's dive in and get ready, man. I want to kind of get your thoughts on this upcoming camp for Nebraska. Media Days next week. We'll be at Indy, and then things get real here towards the end of July. And how's your outlook, level of optimism? Let's start right there.
I think, your main goal, it's the first time in a long time where I say that 6-6 is real. Mm-hmm. That's, you don't want to set a goal that you feel is underneath your potential, but you want to set a goal that's realistic. Well, if you look at getting to 6-6 and now you're bowl eligible, you get 15 more practices, you get to expose yourself to a different area of the country that may not see what you do, may not have seen you play. So that's kind of where it's at. Old habits die hard, and there's a lot of stuff they're going to have to overcome. But I think the staff does a great job of that, of empowering the guys to do things the right way, be held accountable for all of your actions, and overcome any mistakes that you make. So my baseline, just be 6-6, and then you can go from there. Now, anything above that is gravy, and anything less than that, then you probably need to be a little bit worried. But right there in the middle, win your 6, play your bowl game, win your bowl game, be above 500, and build from that. I think it's a great first-year stepping stone.
Verz, when we talk about those old habits and what made you guys and some of the teams of the 90s so tough to deal with was not only depth and talent, but how you guys prepared and those practice habits. Can you speak to that a little bit, your time and just the training, the grind you guys went through?
Well, I think, to a man, the guys that I was lucky enough to play with will all tell you that the game, by the time you got to the game, that was the easy part. All of the work had been done, and there was usually, credit to Coach Osborne, Coach Tenneper, Solich, McBride, all down the line, all the coaches that had gone through there. They had us so well prepared that very rarely did you get in a game that you hadn't seen something. And that work is what wins the game. It isn't how you play on Saturday. That game is won Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I think Thursday is even a stretch. It's won on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. It's how hard you work on those days. Again, guys from an era long ago will tell you they despised Tuesday and Wednesday practice. They knew what they were in for, and they knew what it was going to entail, and no part of it was fun. And no part of it did you look forward to it. But when you put in that work and you put in that suffer by Saturday, then you were ready to go. And like I said, the game after that was easy.
And Matt, not only does that underscore the importance of your coaching staff getting you ready, I think it also underscores the importance of having depth on your roster, having guys that are, second and third team on the depth chart that can get you ready for what you're going to face on Saturday. And at times they can be better than what you're going to face on Saturday.
The clear definition of role is something that I think has been lost along the way. A lot of people will tell you, my scheme is so good, it doesn't matter what you do, I'm going to have this guy be able to do this, blah, 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 blah. Well, that's all a bunch of crap, right? You've got to have guys that understand their role on the team. Now and when you're younger, that may be just to try to make the older guy better. And when you're older, it may be to try to pick the younger guy up off the ground and say, hey, buddy, I was been in your spot. You're going to get knocked on your ass, but you just got to get back up and try again. So that part of continuity on a team, that's probably most important. But from the guy that signs the check to the guy that washes the jocks, they all have to be felt to be made valuable. They all have to feel important. They'll have to know that their job directly reflects how success is achieved. And if you can't do that, and if you got guys that don't feel they're any part of your team, then you're going to have a problem. But when everybody feels they're a part of a team success, there's nothing better ever created in humanity than that.
Verz, how did you feel valued?
There's a couple different ways. Like my redshirt freshman year, we only had one center. but they had to run 2 groups of scout team offense. And with one center, that meant I got to run both groups. So I would run a play, I would run back over the other huddle, I would get that play, I would run back to the line of scrimmage. So for everybody else that say got 70 reps in a practice, I got 140. But I was acknowledged by the coaches and by the players, Raymakers and Perot would say, hey, thanks, man, we know that sucks. But you did the best you could for as long as you could before you looked like you were going to die. But, McBride would acknowledge it, and this little stuff like that, right? Because if I then decide, well, I don't want to do this, now you got to switch guys around, and it's not as smooth as it was, and all that kind of stuff. No, by no means was I irreplaceable. There were guys that could have stepped in and did it, but just by the numbers, we weren't able to do it at the time. So little stuff like that, you see cool moments. Will Shields was just a great human being, a great person, like to kind of teach us all the ropes when we got in there in '92. It's just your band of brothers, man. And does that premier guy genuinely care about everybody on the team is a big piece of it. If your stars are your hardest workers and they're your best teammates, chances are you're going to be real good.
Matt Vrzal's with us, Hail Varsity Radio, at Verz51 on Twitter. Host of Husker Hangover. You catch that with Hurrdat as it is streamed last fall. Really good content and analysis on Sunday mornings for you. Verz, you're a part of the high school coaching scene. You also do training and have for a number of years. I want to touch a little bit here on some of the in-state talent surge. It's not new. Nebraska has had banner years of D1 talent, but there's more and more years of that being a reality in state. Can you speak to that a little bit, some of the kids you're getting to see and help develop?
Well, I don't think it's a resurgence, right? I think it has always been there.
Okay.
It's just being paid attention to. Previous regimes didn't feel Nebraska had enough talented kids to play. Let's just be honest. Let's say what it is. They didn't feel a kid from Nebraska had the talent to play at Nebraska, except for a select chosen few. And they had no vision, and they had no foresight to say, hey, if I take that kid and I get him here, and I get him bought in, and he's a weight room guy, and he works hard, and he shows the rest of these guys how Nebraska kids work out and how they do that stuff, he does nothing but benefit my team. He makes me better in every aspect. So I tip of the cap to Coach Foley, Coach Rule, the rest of the staff for going out and acknowledging the Nebraska kid that is there. They may not be Texas kid. They may not be California kid that's ready to roll day one, but in 2 years, after some more development, some more work, they're going to be ready, and they're going to be ready to kill. And so that's a fun thing to see, is all these kids get acknowledgement for all their hard work and all the things they do. It isn't the University of Nebraska, or isn't the University of the United States. It's the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. So the more Nebraska kids you can get on it that earn it and that deserve it, I think the better it will go. Now, you still have to sprinkle in talent from out of state. I have no problem with out-of-state people. A lot of them are my great friends. But if you can build your core basis principle around Nebraska kid, it will go well for you.
And Matt, I think one of the reasons why we use the term resurgence is because within recent years, we've seen a real trend of some of the who's who of college football coming to Nebraska and trying to pluck kids out of this state, with Georgia and Alabama and Notre Dame and a plethora of other schools all being within the state just in the class of 2024. And I want to get your thoughts on what that means for the kids within the state of Nebraska, that now it's not choosing between North Dakota State or South Dakota State and Nebraska. It could be choosing between Georgia and Nebraska, or between Notre Dame and Nebraska.
I mean, and it's, prior regimes, it's negligent, and they should be embarrassed on how they acted. But for the opportunities presented to Nebraska kids, it's great, because now the kid does have some cards to play. They can say, hey, maybe I am good enough to go play at Iowa State or wherever. Maybe something doesn't feel 100% right when I'm at Nebraska. But when I go to XYZ college, I feel 100% comfortable, and that's okay. I'm not saying every kid in the state's going to go, but, yeah, it's negligent by prior staff. It's embarrassingly negligent. And it's a great opportunity for the young man to go on and continue his football career and hopefully use the game of football the way the game of football is using them. You know, you're going to get an education, now you get a little extra money with the NIL stuff, and that's the trade-off. Like, people don't want to talk about the trade-off. I'm going to give you effort and my talent set. You're going to give me an education and now a little bit of extra money. That's the trade. That's the deal that's made. And so the more people understand that, the better. Now, the more chances you get to talk to people about other opportunities to play at other schools, the better. Everybody wants to have a bunch of job offers, and then you pick the one that fits you best.
Verz, as a Nebraska kid, how did you make out-of-state kids feel at home?
God, we were just talking about this the other day. Larry Townsend, who was from California, he had never been to the farm. And so around Christmas time, right before we would go to bowl games, so probably a little before Christmas, but Larry was there. I think Clint Finley went, who was from Texas, and a couple other guys. We just went up to my grandma's farm. And, you know, my grandma, may she rest in peace, was about 4'8", and Larry was about 6'5". My grandma was a white woman, and Larry was a very dark African-American gentleman. And they got along thick as thieves. But just, you know, just introducing them into your family set. This is what it is. If you get in a pinch, there's another mom and dad that can help you out. Here's a grandma that you can call if you need to. So it's just being basically a good human being and saying, hey, let's go get along. Let's have a hell of a time. Let's just win a bunch of games and be dumb college kids together and have a lot of fun.
So how did Larry take to the farm?
He loved it. Yeah, Clint Finley will still call me about. He calls them biscuits. They're just rolls. They're dinner rolls. But Clint will want some biscuits. And Larry just laughed. He's like, he says, let me get this straight. This lady here, she runs all this operation by herself. And I said, well, Bud, my grandpa has been dead since I was 13. So this is her joint. Like, she is judge, jury, executioner. She runs this show. And, you know, it's just amazing. He's just amazed by her. And that's cool. You know, you get to see that kind of stuff and you get to see stories like that. And everybody's done it. And, you know, that's the great part about the Nebraska kids. They'll run those guys home because nobody wants to be alone on Christmas or around Christmas. And it may not be your family, but it's my family, and you can come hang out with us anytime you want. So that's little stuff like that makes it cool and makes it fun. And you know, I think Grandma talked about it as much as we talk about it. But, yeah, it was just a cool deal. But that's the main way. You're all in it together. Invite that person to come meet your family and then get along and have a good time.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Matt Vrzal's with us. Wrap it up with him. Hail Varsity Radio at Verz51 on Twitter. So I'm going to get to the schedule here. And what game or two have you circled, or maybe you haven't, but do you look as kind of those coin flippers, Verz, that could make 6-6 or better?
I think you have a lot of coin flip games currently. Now, as the rule tenure evolves, and people can interpret this however they want. Okay, this is a business, and it is being run as such. I would not get overly attached to any one player this season. I would cheer for the team as a whole, because that roster next year probably is going to turn over again. They're going to have a lot of guys come in, and unfortunately that means some guys have to leave. Now, those guys that potentially could leave may get pissed about that and may just fight that out where that new guy coming in can't take their job, and that's awesome. I think your first two are coin flips. It's the first game of the year for a new coach in a new place. So I don't know. I have no idea what could happen in Minnesota. Deion Sanders and his crew, I have no idea what he's going to end up having through his 95 transfer portal guys that come in, if they all buy into what they're doing. I would not sleep on Northern Illinois because they run the ball real well. They can do some things that, you know, if you're not disciplined, could be problematic. Louisiana Tech, you're probably in good shape there. Michigan, let's just be honest with ourselves, let's cover. Like, I think a cover is a win in that instance. Illinois, I really hate the fact that Bielema has been able to establish what he's wanted to do there so quickly, because he and whomever is coaching his offensive line, and it kind of varies around sometimes, but they can get a crew of 5 or a crew of 10 in lockstep really fast, and they're maulers. They do a nice job. Northwestern, you're going to win that one just because that thing is a debacle and it gets worse every day. Purdue would be a game. I put a 75% win on it. Oh, where do we go next? Michigan State? Is that next? Yeah, Michigan State.
That's smart.
Always a close game. I'd say probably coin toss. Maryland, I don't know enough about them to give you an honest opinion. I really don't. I know they're known for crab cakes. They say they're known for football, but I doubt it. Wisconsin, somebody with Fickle has to sit down and tell me why he thinks he needs to change that offense. Now, for Nebraska, huge opportunity because you go wherever they were going to find all those monsters, and you say, hey, they may want to do that with you guys. We would love for you to come down here and play. We would love for you to be a part of this because we want to beef you up, and we want to pull, and we want to hit people hard, and we want to do all these things. Then in Iowa, we're going to win. So that's kind of my Wisconsin. I would say I'm probably a 60% win on that. 7 if on the road. I don't know, maybe 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's kind of how. There's a lot of coin toss. Now, that 6-6 is my low bar of it.
Sure.
In the past, 6-6 was a hope. It was a goal. 6-6 is a low bar for me right now. I would not be surprised if they win a couple more than that. And now you're doing some things, and now you're really bringing attention to yourself so you can continue all that momentum you have on the recruiting trail, which the coaching staff is doing a great job of.
Verz, as you look at an identity for what you want to do offensively in a run identity, and we talked a little bit about this with Searles yesterday, but can you project or estimate what you think Nebraska could do best when it comes to running the ball? Do you think it's power? Do you think it's counter? I mean, what style do you think may fit the 5 guys plus they're trying to get figured out, and then the running back room as well? I mean, what style, could fit best for the run game and the ground attack?
Okay, if we keep it simple, because some of these pundits that are out there want to take a very simple game and complicate it, okay? We're just going to put it in 3 phases, all right? We're going to put it inside zone, outside zone, and pin and pull game, okay? So for every pinner, meaning somebody blocks down, there's got to be a puller, all right? So if we keep it that style, I think what benefits Nebraska the most is an inside zone scheme, because at the point of contact, you can get a 2 versus 1 block.
Sure.
Okay? And you're going to be in that set. Now, where in the past, Nebraska has not had this advantage, the quarterback is now a threat to run the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I don't think there should be any hesitation to run Sims, because I think Henrik Harburg, with the weight he's put on and the way he was flying around at practice, he sent Gifford flying through the air to practice I was at. So you can't call plays to be hesitant. Oh my gosh, what if he gets hurt? You have to call plays as if we need to play 11 on 11, and that quarterback has to be a viable threat. So if his read gives him a run read, he then runs, and he runs well, which he does. So I would stick in the inside zone phase of things would be my main identity, because if I need short yardage, I can put Irvin in. If I need more of a slasher, I can put Grant in. I can do a lot of things very similar. People think our offense was complex back in the day. It was those 2 blocking schemes, inside zone, outside zone. They had a bunch of different play calls, but the basic fundamentals were all the same. And then that way no one had to think. You had to communicate, but you didn't have to think. And when you don't have to think, then you just go out and be the big athletic human being you are, and you start running people over, and that feels awesome. And then you do it some more, and before you know it, that guy you're playing against doesn't want to play anymore. And so I would focus mainly on the inside zone part of it, because I think currently they've got to become a little more athletic for the pin-pull game. And I think their speed has to increase some to really benefit in the outside zone game. Now, the strides they made from last year to spring, credit to Coach Campbell, are noticeable. That they're quicker with their feet, still need to continue to be quicker. But they are working at it. They are working hard at it. So if that foot speed comes up and that athleticism improves, now you open up a full gamut. But for me, I would base my offense on inside zone concept, where I give my quarterback a read and then that quarterback can determine, hey, I'm going to keep it because that guy did this, or I'm going to give it because that guy did that. And I think that's beneficial in all phases of the game for Nebraska, for what they have for players right now.
Verz, this was fun, man. We'll get caught up again. Thanks for giving us a few minutes. Always fun to talk ball with you.
Yeah, you bet, boys. Be good.
All right, there he is, Matt Vrzal, talking Husker football, some thoughts on the run game. And, yep, always good to get his take on things before camp gets going. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark, Hail Varsity Radio. A lot of stuff on NIL, SEC Media Days, Nebraska, and the butterfly effect of the Big Ten invite. We got into it. Gary Barnett was with us to start this hour, and Brandon Vogel also in hour one. 2 segments there with Verz. So if you just caught part or you want to get caught up on the entire show, easy to do. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Subscribe to Hail Varsity Radio. It is free and on your time. Want the video portion, always remind you to subscribe. And again, free and insightful, not just us, but all the content and video that Hail Varsity YouTube channel has. Check that out. Can watch the show that way or on the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed. Give us a follow there at HVarsity Radio. We'll wind down a Thursday, busy Friday to tell you about as we continue on. Hail Varsity, we're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time on a Thursday. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. Reminder to buckle up. 1 of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an alcohol-impaired driver. Why take chances? If you drink, don't drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office as we wind down a Thursday. Tomorrow's show, hoping for a Jacob Padilla sighting. We'll see if we can grab him. Talk some Husker Hoops news this week. Bill Dolman with us in hour 2. Brady Holtman's the return of one Pride of Chicago, Danny Burke. Look at that.
Ooh, it's been a while.
He's done doing bachelor parties, apparently, and he's back at it. Last bachelor party you were on, what was the memorable moment? Was it steaks? Was it cigars? Was it golf? Was it cinnamon at the center stage at midnight? I mean...
Oh, God. It was my brother's bachelor party.
Right, so you went to that. That was fun, though, because you guys, did you golf?
Yeah, we had hit Top Golf up in Omaha.
Right, you went to golf?
His favorite spots up in Omaha. It was pretty low-key. He's not the type to go...
Throw ones.
Watch Cinnamon on main stage. That's not him. But we tried to tailor it for him.
Sorry.
And I was like, hey, let's go hit the casinos in Council Bluffs. And he's like, that's also not me.
Did you go blackjack or no?
No, he's not a casino guy, not a gambler. Okay. So we tried to tailor it for him. We did not go classic bachelor party of doing all the debauchery because just not him. So it was just a good time with friends. Top Golf. We got some pizza. We got some drinks. It was pretty low key. It was good stuff.
Couple of different ones, and it's been 100 years since I've been on one. One was in Arizona for my brother, and that was cool. Just steaks and beers and good times. The other was a dear friend. I was in his wedding. Went to a place that rhymes with rhino, and there was a giant flashlight that found his left eye socket.
Really?
Yeah. Bouncer was keyed up. And being the jerk, I ducked. That's over 20 years ago. So, no, I haven't experienced the bachelor party thing for forever. That's okay.
I've heard some good stories from my dad's bachelor party. I don't think I've heard all of them, but I won't share them on the air because I don't think he'd appreciate that. But I've heard some good stories there. Some good ideas for future reference. I did see a funny video the other day of the difference between bachelorette parties and bachelor parties, where the bachelorette parties are like, all right, girls, let's
have some wine.
This is our theme for the day. It's late night last night. We're going to get our outfits on. We're going to go hit Nashville Main Street.
Right.
And compared to the guys where it's you wake up on the couch and you have the...
Make sure all your digits are there.
Yeah, get the empty beer can that you fell asleep with off your chest and you wake up. All right, what are we doing today, boys? Golf?
Let's go detox by the pool, right?
Not too bad.
So, well, good enough. Somehow we got into the bachelor party topic of discussion.
And the thing is with a bachelor party, like for my future bachelor party someday, I'm not a destination guy. I don't really care what we do. As long as my friends are there and we can have a good time, like we could go down and hang out underneath a bridge for all I care.
As long as you got the company.
Yeah, as long as I got my friends there and we got some beers and we have some good times. That's all that matters to me. So
well, listen, it has shifted to not always, but you do the steaks, the beers, the bourbons, the golf. That's a good time.
It's a good day.
They need to bring back the classic Four Locos just for bachelor parties, though.
Huh?
The Four Locos that actually had caffeine in there.
Oh, okay.
They need to bring those back.
Maybe those things weren't bad enough.
They got banned for a reason.
Jeez.
So Connor must not be a Red Bull vodka guy?
Can't say I am.
Missing out.
Oh, all right. Talk to you at 4 tomorrow.